And you're very welcome on the 18th of November to our International Men's Day, Workplace Wellness, Pandemic Work Life and All Things Men. Close to our heart, we all have men in our lives, fathers, sons, husbands, spouses, partners. And this is an important topic, even more so given the last 20 months we've all been through, and probably what we're going to continue to go through. As president of the chapter, when I took over this role nearly 2 years ago, as I'm coming to the end of my term, I had a vision that I wanted to do a couple of webinar-based events that were based on panel discussions. And the first one we did this year was an International Women's Day, which is very well received. And my commitment to the board was that if we did it for International Women's Day, we'd do it for International Men's Day. So hence we're all in here this evening with a great panel to discuss a great subject today. So I'll hand it over to you, Dermot and Tara, to kick it off, please.
Thanks, Jackie.
Thanks, Dermot. Thank you, Jackie. Very well put. And we are, any of us who were there on the night for the PMI International Women's Day event, the theme was Choose to Challenge. And by God, did Jackie Glynn take that up and run with it. At the end of the event, the promise was made, and that's why we're all here this evening. And Peter Glynn put, again, no relation, an extra E in the name, decided, let's get this great panel together. And Dermot has been busy in the background getting that to happen. And we may well be joined in a little while by Finian Murray from the HSE, who is Men's Health Senior Promotion Officer, who has some great messages to share. And the one and only KB, you can see her there, Katrina Bentley. And I have learned KB, anyone who knows Katrina knows that it's KB. She is CEO of Men's Aid. And as I mentioned, Peter, who is the Programme Director and also the Marketing Director of the Ireland chapter of the PMI. So guys, this is your event, as always with the PMI events. I love how accessible they are. The questions, they're coming up there. Where are you? What's the job? And it's all about interacting with helping you to get what it is that you want from these events. They're for you. We aim to stick to the time, get finished at 8. If there is an ongoing discussion at the time, you're very welcome to stay with it. And there is going to be some serious chat happening this evening, given the fact that we are looking at International Men's Day and also looking at some of the heavy themes that may end up coming up. We are in the middle of a pandemic. The focus this evening is on workplace wellness, the pandemic, work life, and all things men. So there is also, we're going to put up further reading and further information at the end of the evening. We will also put up any helpline numbers that might be relevant as you listen to stories and things that have happened, and also advice from our experts throughout the evening. We are going to put up in the Mentimeter poll. It is a wonderful way to communicate. It is anonymous. So if there are queries or questions that you have, pop them in. You'll see already that there are no names attached to the answers there. So if there is something happening for you, this is, and we need you to know that it is a safe space. Of course, if you want to do a public comment, very welcome to. We see some lovely ones coming in there, and we've seen them from Gary and Francis and everybody else, and just having the chats too. So there's options for everything this evening. So I think we should kick it off, KB, and let's get the ball rolling with, firstly, Men's Aid. Maybe just, we've heard of Women's Aid an awful lot. We hear of Men's Aid not so much. What exactly do you guys do?
Great. Thanks very much for having us and inviting us to be here, Jackie, and to Peter as well, and to the team. It's been a terrific couple of days organising this behind the scenes, so we very much appreciate this evening. Men's Aid Ireland, essentially we are the specialist domestic violence service for boys and men who are experiencing an abusive relationship. And we support men from the ages of 18 to 88. And we do that through our helpline, our one-to-one appointments, our outreach, our community hubs, our court support, and then we have 2 types of different counselling as well. And we have a training academy as well for frontline, in particular frontline and corporates. And I suppose we've had a busy time. That's like our colleagues in Women's Aid as well. We helped about 5,500 men last year in 2020, and we expect to support about 8,000 this year. So roughly a jump of 32%, an increase. So we're frontline, and it's a challenging role for the team. We're a tiny little team. Our headquarters is based in Navan in County Meath, but we speak to men from all over Ireland every day. We'd probably be supporting about 25 to 30 men each day.
Unbelievable. The statistics as well, Katrina, there was internationally, the statistics came in, as far as I remember, in media, we got the US figures first, and then slowly but surely across Europe, then the UK, and we're still waiting on some updates, aren't we, here?
Yeah, I think our research is COSC 2005. The most recent research is that our colleagues across in the UK, the Office of National Statistics. Sadly, 1 in 4 women and 1 in 6 men will experience some level of domestic violence during their lifetime. Or another way to put it as well, for every 3 victims in the UK, 1 is male. So, so it really, I suppose, we don't know the true prevalence, I suppose, in Ireland. We do know that men find it very difficult to report, and we know that it's about 5 to 10% of men will report abuse to the Gardaí. So we know it's an issue. I think where we're at with our roughly 8,000 this year is probably only the tip of the iceberg. Sadly, the only way is up. But on the positive side, at least we're here, and there's a great team and there's great support for the men and boys, which brings us back to why we're here on the eve of International Men's Day, because it's a great opportunity to promote the support service nationally for all the various, whether it's anxiety, depression, mental health, to get the positive messages out there to men and boys. And for us, obviously, it's the area of domestic violence.
Absolutely. The theme for this International Men's Day is better relations between men and women. And that's something that Finian, so on his behalf, wanted to raise this evening, that what they're seeing a lot of in the HSE, and he sent us the data on this, is that it often falls to other family members to talk to and look after some men when they feel they can't speak, when they feel that society has not given them the option to speak up. The women who they're living with and the children who they're living with possibly, and the dependents end up trying to coax them to speak and help mind them. Are you seeing that? And what can we do to help? And how can men help be supported to help themselves?
Definitely. So we take calls from mums and sisters every day. I think us sisters, we're brilliant because we see the problem, we see the issue, and us sisters, we've no issue in picking up the phone and ringing around and asking for help, or who is the best person, what do they need. So we're definitely seeing an increase in that. But by even having this conversation, we're kind of really bringing it out into the community and into the homes, and these conversations will break down that stigma and the fears and the shame there. So absolutely, and also the other point just off the top of my head, like, it impacts the whole family, Tara. The grandparents mightn't have access to the grandchildren as much. It's your neighbours, it's your workplace, and that brings us, I suppose, one of the first points that I was going to talk about this evening is the connection with our work family, and the great relationships, the friendships that you connect with your work colleagues over years and years. When we were pre-COVID, obviously sharing an office with people, in the days we were spending more time with our colleagues than we were with our families, husbands and wives and children. So workplace wellness and the work family, it really is a very important connection for all of us, and it has been obviously very challenging for everyone. There's been homeschooling, all of a sudden you're with your other half 24/7, we've been in lockdown. It would really, the social anxiety has been there, definitely, and it would really test anyone's emotional resilience. So I think it comes back to just acknowledging and recognizing that a work pal or a workmate might actually not be having a great time at home. It mightn't actually be as safe as you think, and to really just check in on them.
You know what, Gibby, one of the things that I'd love to do for you, just to give you a bit of an idea, and for Peter and for Jackie, as well as Dermot, if we can go back, Dermot, and have a look at the beginning, and see where people are. They're sending in and filling in their answers there, but where they are with us. We'll have a look at that in a second. What's
interesting there in that statistic, and there's more people saying no, with the prevalence survey of roughly, if it's 1 in 4 women and 1 in 6 men, you do know someone in a relationship that's abusive. It's a sad statistic in terms of in terms of when you break down the population. You probably do know somebody. You just might not be aware actually of what's going on behind their front door. That's all. It's so difficult to talk about it.
And you know what, Katrina, because Peter's going to be talking more as well about what's happening in the workplace, and in terms of the PMI and project managers and how that is relevant there. What can we do? So if and when we know of something, because we're remote working, it could be a long time before everybody's back into the office. That's as we know, given where we're at the moment, some tough times coming, and we know that Christmas is a challenging time for people and for families. So what can we do? What should we be looking out for?
Yeah, I think it's important still to check in with your work colleagues. I appreciate we might not be around the coffee machine or going for the 11 o'clock coffee so much compared to the past. There's a couple of things. An employer to keep an eye out for. Maybe some staff would be happy to work in their workplace if they feel comfortable, if it's safe to do so as well, because actually they might be flagging that they don't actually want to be in the home place. So that's just one thing for employers or bosses to be aware of. The second thing really is to still try and hook up in terms of whether it's a Zoom or a WhatsApp, or still try and actually have a team. Like I would chat to my team once a week, just on Zoom, not about work, just bring them together in a Zoom room or whatever that is at 11 o'clock and bring a coffee to the laptop and try and keep that connection going. And if there is somebody that you are a little bit concerned about, or ask them to go for a walk, go for a coffee and a walk and check in on them. And there's 3 steps. We call it the recognize, respond, and refer. So it's actually about just asking, how are you doing? How are things for you at home during lockdown? How are things? And actually just listen to the response, because the response might actually be something along the lines of, well, it was really tricky, actually. I don't know. The relationship is touch and go. It's a bit dicey. We're not getting on as much. And just to purely recognize that your colleague might actually be struggling a bit. But by asking the question, you're opening it up there for them to confide in you.
Give us those 3 R's again, KB. Really
so it's
good.
recognizing, which is first, whereby you basically turn around and you just say, well, how are you? It's checking in on somebody. How are things for you at home during lockdown? I call it make eye contact and show empathy, because a lot of abuse is actually invisible. Coercive control, which is emotional, psychological, financial, sexual, you don't see it. So again, by asking the question, how are you doing, and listening to the response, just don't assume because there's no bruises or broken bones that everything is okay. So the first one is recognizing and actually just asking the question. The second is respond. And the stats there, I suppose, I hope it helps for people to hear that they're not alone. We're helping 25 to 30 men a day. So again, it's just to let people know that they're not alone, that their experience is possibly, it's not going to be unique. We'll have heard it before. So if 1 in 3 victims are male, it's just the fact that they haven't come forward. We know the reasons why. Roughly, it's because they fear of being mocked, being laughed. They fear of not being believed. They fear of homelessness because there's no refuge. They fear losing the connection with their children. Financially, they probably can't afford to rent another place because the money is obviously in mortgage and college and schools, etc. So we know why men find it so hard to come forward. So if somebody does respond, it's really about what we call the 3 E's. It's about engaging, make eye contact, and show empathy. So the first thing to actually say is along the lines of, I'm sorry to hear about what's going on at home. I'm sorry to hear about what you're going through. How can I help? What can I do? Can I help you? Can I get you a helpline? Or even just by saying, whenever you're ready and you want to talk about it, I'm here. I'm here for that coffee anytime. And then that person has trusted you with something very personal and very traumatic. So that actually will help relieve them straight away, because it's an immediate validation, and that they feel that they've trusted you with something very, very confidential. So that would be the respond. And then the third is the refer. And there's many helplines across Ireland. The HSE has a list on their website, ourselves, Women's Aid, the Samaritans.
Actually, while you're talking, KB, we might get Dermot to put that up on screen for us now. Just the Men's Aid number would be great, but sorry, so refer, yeah. So the refer is really to find your friend, your work friend, or if it's a family member, that helpline number, just to, if they'd like to ring, because we take calls from the same person. Sometimes they ring, they've lots of questions, they download it, they'll ring back a few days later with a few more questions. Mums and sisters do that all the time. So it's just to know that there is help, and there's national services everywhere, and really excuse me, every conversation counts. That's one thing that we've taken away from the last 2 years.
from just nuggets of men saying to us, oh, so-and-so said to me to give you a buzz. I wasn't sure. Thank God I actually just rang you. It takes a lot of courage for somebody to ring a helpline, and we understand that. We totally get that. So if the person needs to ring a number of times because you forget what we've said, especially things like legal orders, protection orders, safety orders, it's family law, so the Domestic Violence Act, Coercive Control Act, it's very heavy. Family law is very difficult. And if you're in the fog of abuse, it's very difficult to try and remember what did the girl at the end of the phone say. So if you need to ring back again, it's fine. But really what I think the key message is to check in on your workmates. Domestic violence is the other pandemic we're all fighting, and it's behind the front doors. But just the takeaway really is that you're not alone, that there's loads of helplines available. And on the eve of International Men's Day, if you're between 18 and 88 and you're unsure about your relationship, whether it's a healthy relationship, feel free to give us a call and we'll give you the support that you need.
Excellent, Dermot. Thank you so much. Men's aid number there, 015444381, and we'll keep coming back to that as we go through the evening. Thank you, Dermot. That's great to have that up there. We might have a look now, KB, at where everybody is this evening, and thank you to everyone for joining us on this Thursday. Nice, kind of a wintry, still not unseasonably warm, I think we'd all agree. But thanks for being with us. So if we can just see where everybody has been messaging in to say where they are around the country, and also we'll have a look and see who's with us in terms of the job. And we'll get a quick flash now. Look at this, you're getting a real sneaky peek of all of our slides. You may, anyone with who's a speed reader is getting all the background info. Thanks, Dermot. Here we go. Meath, Dublin 3, Ireland, Dublin, Ireland. Okay. So we have, and here's job titles as well: lecturers, directors, PMO manager, head of PMO, advisor, program management. Good to know that. Before we move on, because we're going to be talking to you later about a number of things, including a very special event that you have coming up and how people can get involved and join you up for that. Tell us about when you look at the work that you're doing day to day, and then you bring it back to International Men's Day, and also looking, I suppose, given the fact that we're here for this PMI event, what advice do you have for people who are finding themselves? I mean, project managers often have worked independently and often have worked their own hours, given the nature of the work. So it can be a lonely existence in some ways, and then very intense and deadline driven. So given that, is there any advice that you have for people to look after themselves?
Absolutely. Self-care is a huge part of daily living. And I think it was Jackie who said last week, not work-life balance, life-work balance. And I suppose we're frontline and we're very aware of that, even ourselves, given obviously what we're working at. So I think it's the basic things like, it's your exercise, it's your healthy diet, etc. But the importance of talking to someone and to remove the kind of a little bit of stigma, not so much now in terms of counselling and how important it is, and actually to check in on yourself. So we definitely have, I think we supported, there was about 390 counselling sessions last year. Some of them were emergency, which was terrific to hear that men were picking up the phone. We changed the word from, there was another word that we were using, we were trying to get the language right, and the word counselling was softer. Some people were calling it therapy. So there was a little bit of stigma around that. So we were asking some of the men, well, what would you like us to call it so that we will pick up the phone? And they said, well, having a chat with someone, yes. You know what I mean? So I think more and more as well that we say to people, like, I have supervision every month. I have, all of my team, even our office manager, even the person who does data entry for us has counselling once a month, because it's so important for your mental health. So I think that's really something that I suppose we very much we're very aware of. And also to take time out, to actually take time out and to put the laptop down. When you work, independently, it's quite isolated if you're working home alone, as they say, to take time out as well and to put down the laptop, you know what I mean, if you can, and to get out in the fresh air, walk your dog, say hello to your neighbours, engage with people, make eye contact, just for pure actually self-care, and do what you like to do. you know what I mean, as well. So there are some hobbies that are still unrestricted, you know. So whether it's, you know what I mean, going for your ice cream or whatever it is, just to make some downtime. And I think relationships have really been tested. And to make sure that you have some of your own time and couple time as well. And dare I say, whatever date night is for a couple as well, just to get some time together as well. And conscious, obviously, of the children too. It's been probably the most challenging 2 years of any person's life. But even if you're aware of that and make those little changes, can really, really help.
Yes. Let's have a look here. So we're just the previous, yes, there we go. Thanks, Dermot. So we're working from home, the office or hybrid. So you've got 20% home and office, and then 60% hybrid. So what effect does this have?
Yeah.
What are you seeing?
That's nice to see that some people with, you know, obviously in line with guidelines as well, like we're staggering ourselves going back in as well. And I make an effort then to meet one of the girls, and we go to the car park and have a coffee face to face on whatever day I go up. So I actually say to the office, I'll be in on the Tuesday. So who's going to be in the car park with me having the coffee on the Tuesday? So we're making more of an effort for the 11 o'clock. And then we have a fancy cappuccino this time, one with cinnamon, or what are we doing? Just to actually, and to leave the laptop and I leave the phone behind. I leave the phone behind. And it means then my colleague is getting 100% of my attention as well. So I think we've all got quite glued to these machines. Interesting that there is a mix there. There's a blend of hybrid, and again, just to be aware, for some people the workplace might actually be safer. The same with universities, just to say that as well about the students that we're supporting. Sadly, we have 18-year-old school children in their school uniform in secondary school as clients as well. So it's just to recognise it can be in the university, you know, sphere, it can be in the workplace, and it can be in the home, like, because abuse doesn't discriminate at all. So interesting, yeah. And I suppose, yeah, the new COVID guidelines, I suppose what happened with us straight away in the last few days, as the numbers went up, our phone lines went up as well with anxiety. People feeling were we still going to be operating? You know, absolutely, we're going nowhere. You know what I mean? So social anxiety really has built in the last 48 hours, unfortunately, with the numbers. So we're going nowhere is the message, you know.
Okay. And listen, the irony is not lost on us that Peter on screen, who we're coming to in a second, blessed is he amongst women on International Men's Day, on the eve of it. Dermot is there in the background. We have many people watching and many of the PMI team working away behind the scenes. But we are she for he's, just as we've had many great he for she's on the panel for International Women's Day. And also, given the theme again this year, better relations between men and women. That's the goal. Often as well, KB, I was telling you this before, that we focus so much, and society is focusing a lot now, and rightly so, on getting equality for women, right? Equality for women and men. The thing, sometimes the message can be lost sometimes, that some men are not getting the support that they need. Is that something that you're seeing, that you're fighting so hard to say it's equality that we need? No gender has to go down in order for the other to get looked at.
Absolutely. I suppose our approach for Men's Aid is a victim-centric, you know what I mean, approach. So whoever is the person in need, regardless of their gender. We do have male employees, but the majority of our helpline are females. We've all worked supporting women as well. And in my voluntary role, I work with women and children. So it's not about it. It's not a gendered issue at all. And when it comes to equality, we have a lot of work to do in relation to giving confidence and encouragement to the man to come forward. And I suppose some days when I'm battling in some of my conversations or before the Oireachtas, I'm thinking of the 18-year-old who sat in our office. I'm thinking of the 22-year-old. I'm actually thinking of the generations coming behind us, because that's somebody's son or somebody's brother. I am thinking also of the older men who are in their 60s and 70s and 80s that have experienced 30 plus years of abuse. Absolutely. But we are where we are. We can only go forward. But I do think the equality issue is actually coming forward. It is out there more now on the social media platforms. You know, when domestic violence is mentioned, whether it's a headline or the media, the public actually put out our phone number for us. We don't. So it's the more conversations and the events that we have like this bring terrific awareness and education, and it plants the seed, and people think, oh right. So again, it's when you start that conversation and people think, okay, oh really, is that the stats, is that the number? So I suppose it comes back to every conversation counts, and I suppose we're all striving for a world free of all violence, for all women, all men, and all genders. That's what we're ultimately. That's the goal. Is to remove all violence. You know what I mean?
Yes,
just to say, 6% of our database, or 6% of our clients would be LGBT. So we have a number of men who are transitioning as well. So. And they're going through abusive relationships, etc. So it's not black and white. It's not black and white. It's about the person. It's really about, just keeping it victim centric.
Well said, KB. Well said. And as we said, Finian Murray you would have seen, he was down to join us this evening, and unfortunately he's just having some technical issues. So he might just jump in and photobomb us or video bomb us in a little while. But in the meantime, we'll just keep peppering some of his thoughts throughout. And one of the key points that he wanted to make is the detail of the need for help that they're seeing in the HSE, how in this area that he works in, which is in men's health, that he's a senior promotion officer, the need that he's seeing, and the lack of availability of appointments, and also, as KB said, that the need outweighs the supply at the moment. So it's great to keep the conversations, he said, going, and also to continuously let men know where they can go for help. And we have more information coming on that later on, and further reading as well. But I think we should go now to Peter Glynn. Peter, who is the Programme Director and also the Marketing Director of the Ireland Chapel of PMI. Peter, thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Tara. I think it's really, really good to be here celebrating International Men's Day. I suppose I feel very privileged to be the man amongst women. So thank you for that. I just thought maybe I'd share some of my perspective on this. I mean, I think as someone who has over 20 years experience in project and program management, and I look at the way things kind of have developed in the last 18, 19 months with COVID, with the workplace. And I don't mean to make this a gender-based issue, but I suppose I'm going to focus largely on the male side of things here. But I think many of the points are. So I just wanted to start off focusing on the fact that we've got changing times in the workplace. And my own personal view is I don't think life will ever be the same again for any of us. I think that what has happened in the last nearly 2 years has been a big shift in the workplace. We've seen a lot around digital transformation has been accelerated. And as someone who used to work for Microsoft, it was unbelievable to see companies who maybe for years had thought about, should we invest in digital transformation or should we accelerate? And they hemmed and they hawed. And then all of a sudden COVID comes along and things are absolutely accelerated. And I think, as one person said to me, we've probably gone 10 years in the space of 2 years. And I think that the whole workplace is a lot more digital than it was pre-COVID. And I think in terms of men and how that impacts us in the workplace, we've seen home working. We've seen much greater reliance on home working during lockdown. And I thought it was really interesting at the start of the presentation where we talk about hybrid work. And it's interesting where we have 60% of the people online obviously have been involved in hybrid working. That we've seen a lot less travel. I mean, I think that people had gotten very used to having been in the rhythm of a commute every day. And all of a sudden you're working from home 4 or 5 days a week. And that becomes an awful lot less in the way of travel. And I think, that we also kind of have found ourselves, in some cases, we've been working longer hours because we have been using the commute time as some additional hours for the workplace. I think that the other factor, which I hear quite a lot of from my colleagues, from my friends, etc., is we have a lot of people who live in apartments, who live in studio flats, in city centres and elsewhere. And I think when you obviously have 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 people living in a very confined area, that actually creates a challenge where you've got everyone working from home, and maybe, you know, that you've got one person working in the bedroom, you have one person working in the living room, you may have children who are doing homework online as well. And I think that in itself has really changed how people feel about home life and how they feel about the workplace. That Jackie had mentioned, and that with KB as well, that there's a really good podcast which has been produced through PMA, through PMO Joe. I think that was put out in October, where he talks about pivoting the whole concept of having work life, and he refers into that. And he's got a very clear, simple view that we should put life first, and we should have work as part of that. And for me, that is very poignant.
And Peter, we're going to come right back to that point, and just to acknowledge we have Finian with us. Finian, we knew you'd video bomb us. You've just talked about making an entrance. Boom! That's all I heard when we saw you. So you're very, very welcome.
Thanks very much. Welcome, Finian. I'm glad you got over your technical problems there.
Yeah, thanks,
yes.
Don't
worry, Finian.
I'm actually in on my phone, not on my iPad or my laptop. So
well, you're live on stage and you video bombed in like a rock star. We are going to just continue talking to Peter here. He's just telling us about a very interesting point that he heard in relation to this podcast. So we'll come back to you, Finian. We've been peppering some of your thoughts throughout, and we'll come back to you for the full picture in a second. Thank you.
Okay.
Great to have you. Sorry, Peter.
Great. The other thing I'd like to share, really, I suppose, is the impact on family life, and for men in particular. I think.
Oh, Peter, sorry, I really interrupted you. If you'd like to make that point again, because you broke up a tiny bit as well, just in relation to the podcast and the PMO Joe.
Yeah. So I think with the importance of work-life balance, that there's a really good podcast which is produced by PMO Joe, where he's interviewing a guy called Ricardo Vargas, and he talks about the whole thing around work-life balance. But in fact, he's got a great perspective on it, where we should be pivoting on life-work balance, and a very simple statement which he shared that is about putting life first and having work as part of that. And for me, that is very poignant.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think just going back to something you said there, if we have a look at this, Peter, it ties in exactly with what you were saying. So has the pandemic increased the amount of time you spend with family and close friends? So feel free, guys, click on with your Mentimeter and join in with us for this. So at the moment, Peter, what you're seeing there is people agreeing with what you said. A lot of them have more time at home. And some less, as you said, you can end up working longer hours, which ties back into what KB said. We need to, 50-50. So we need to tie in with that need for self-care, getting up away from the desk. What are you seeing, Peter, in relation and hearing from your members in the PMI?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting. I think that there's been a big impact on family and personal lives over this period. And I think probably a lot of men are spending more time with their partners, which was the point that was raised by Jackie, and more time with their kids. I mean, certainly from my own perspective, I've spent a lot of time with my son over lockdown that I wouldn't have got to spend that time with him somewhat otherwise. So I think that for me personally, I have definitely reevaluated my family priorities, and I've spent a lot more time with my kids over lockdown. And I think now that we're starting to go back into I'm going to say a more normal pattern of life, even though it's still fundamentally with us. It's funny that you do miss having the company of your kids 24/7 and all of that. So I think it's definitely had a big impact on family life, and we are definitely looking at how we reevaluate family priorities and personal priorities.
Peter, one thing that I'd love to ask you there, I wasn't sure if that was the Wi-Fi thing and Finian's back, not one video bomb, but two. But something I'd love to ask you, We're noticing a lot. It feels like years ago, even though, many years, even though it was only a short couple ago, where we had that news reporter where his wife partner burst into the room with the kids and she's running across the room, grabbing the children, trying to hide. Now we've all been there, okay? At some version of it. We've nearly all had it. Dermot even had it earlier on this evening. We've all had some version of this. We're not shocked by it. In fact, it lets us get a little bit more of an understanding and an insight into who our colleagues are. Be they a project manager who's working on a big project in our company, or you, the project manager, or all of those job titles that we've seen of everyone who's with us this evening. Do you think, from a men's point of view, are you seeing that men are sharing more and are more comfortable with sharing more about what it is that goes on in that life balance that's coming more into the work?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think that you made reference there into the university lecture, and I think it's interesting because I think with having situations like that, it makes people look more humane. And people do kind of have family lives and things go wrong at home and things happen. And I think certainly for me and my own experience, and from what I'm hearing from PMI members and from friends and family, is that it has made us reevaluate who we are and who we work with.
Yes, and you can see it here, Peter. Have a look at the responses you're getting there.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, yeah, go ahead.
I mean, I think it's interesting to see that of this. I mean, we're looking at about 80-90% of people have done some reevaluation of their goals and their priorities as a result. And I think it's really challenged us in many different ways, from a workplace perspective, from a family life perspective, and from our personal lives.
And I think when we're hiding less and being able to be open more about what's going on, we can get more support. And do you find as well now that the focus is turning? And then I want to move on to Finian. Do you find, and then open up the discussion to all of you together, and then obviously questions, we're going to welcome them in. The way technology is coming and going for us all this evening, any questions that you have, we'll pepper them through. This is your event, so keep them coming into us. And anonymous, if you'd like to, via Mentimeter, or you can put it on the comments there and we'll spot it. But are you finding as well that idea of not just the work-life balance, as we said, Peter, but going forward, people being able to not hide what's going on in the background, getting more support about issues that are right. And once the outcomes are delivered, it doesn't matter so much about the timings or the hours or clock watching.
Yeah, I completely agree. And as someone who used to work for Microsoft, which has a very tech culture and a very much that way of working, I found that we ended up in a culture where it was perfectly acceptable for someone to have to say, I've got to pick my kids up for school at 3 o'clock. I can't meet that I can't make that meeting. And from a Microsoft culture perspective, that's perfectly acceptable. And we may have to reschedule a meeting, or we may have to adjust it. But I think it's made people realize that we have home priorities, we have workplace priorities, and getting that balance right across the piece is important. The other thing I just wanted to very briefly touch on as well, just in terms of actually bringing this back into how we do project management. I think it's interesting when you look at project management, it's a very specific focus for us as professionals. I think it's a very deadline-driven profession. There's a risk of burnout involved in that. And I think with also looking at, there is a general high rate of failure amongst projects. And also, if you look around what's happened since COVID, we haven't been co-located. So those conversations at the water cooler, all of that thing about having that interaction with your colleagues hasn't been there. And I think we're probably have been somewhat a little bit more impacted maybe than some other professions. And I think it's important that we recognize that when you're in project management, it's quite an intense piece of work. And particularly with that being gender neutral, we have to look after our health. And that is from a physical health perspective and from a mental health perspective. Just one or two things I wanted to actually quote. The APM in the UK did a survey last year in May 2020, where they looked at mental health from a project management perspective. And they discovered that over 63% of respondents are feeling stressed because of having to manage their project. And some of the key factors that had come back in that context had been a poor work-life balance, and that was cited in by 40% of respondents. There was a thing around unrealistic expectations, was cited by a third of respondents, and having too much to do was cited by almost 40% of respondents. So I think it's important that as project professionals, we recognize that we work in a very intense environment, and we work in a very deadline-driven environment. And it's really important that we look after our health. And I think just on that point, I'd like to finish off that there are 4 words that I think are very important in the workplace. And they are, how are you doing? And I think it's important that we listen to our colleagues and we lend them that ear. And they are 4 very, very important words for all of us.
Peter, well said. And the answer can't always be fine. And then or else the next question could be, but how are you really doing? And Peter and Finian, this is a nice lead in from Peter into Finian. Women, we are, there's lots of things about us. There's things that we could all do with working on, but one thing we are great at, and this is International Men's Day, don't worry, I know where I'm going here. The one thing we are great at is having a chat. Something is on the brain, we will sit down and we will talk it through. And absolutely, we are rock stars at that, right? We do it as well with the men in our lives, the men that we love, be it sons, dads, partners, work colleagues. How are men doing that with each other? Peter first, and then Finian, I'll ask you to come in on that.
So I think it's really important, but I think that we as men have a reliance on things like gym culture or on the sports club, or maybe for some people it's the pub, but we do have a reliance on that from a male perspective. And I think that's kind of shifting, and it may be a generational thing, but it's really, really important to have that social interaction and to have that outlet for how we can express ourselves and how we can interact socially.
Excellent. And I think it's a perfect segue into Finian as we keep an eye on the clock as well. Finian, you are at the HSE Senior Men's Health Promotion Officer. Could you answer that question as well? How are men doing? How are they at communicating what's going on, and if it's not going well?
Yeah, and that leads in very well to the question that's on the screen. Do you think there is evidence of gender script for men? And our research shows that yes, there still is. Even though.
And what is gendered script? Just for anyone who's wondering.
Even though social and economic roles of men and women are changing, there are still some traditional values and attitudes towards gender still out there. Boys and men continue to be socialized to appear in control, to be strong and to take risks, but this reinforces their exposure to illness and accidental death. So, there's this thing out there, masculinity, or masculinities as we call it now, because there are more than one way of being a man in the world. But sometimes when men perform masculinities, they do take risks with their health, like if they're driving fast, or if they're drinking too much and so on. It may be that they're constructing their masculinity, or they're really performing a masculinity, but at the same time it's at the expense of their health. So that's something that we have come across a lot in the research. Men engaged in health damaging or risky behaviors often do so to prove their masculinity to others. So sometimes it's that bit of the bravado, and that in turn then can have health implications for men. So actually that's why we're delighted that International Men's Day has kind of picked up on the health messages for us, because every year we have Men's Health Week, which takes place just before Father's Day in the summer. And this year it was about making the connections, that you check in with yourself and see, how you're feeling, that you check up with your friends and family, and you check it out. So if something is wrong, that you go to a doctor and get it checked out. So that was our message from Men's Health Week in June, and we would like to reinforce that again now for International Men's Day. So it's like a second bite of the cherry type thing. So that's kind of one of the points. And also there's the whole thing about interconnection between women's health and men's health, and like we have found that sometimes men see health as women's business, and they've allowed women to be the gatekeepers of their health. But that's no longer acceptable, because it's actually putting too much pressure on women to look after men's health. It doesn't encourage men to take more responsibility for their own health, and it's kind of based on that traditional outdated view of gender and women. And then it also fails to cater for a high proportion of men who are not in relationships with women. So there are some of the main reasons why we need to change that gender script.
You're so right, Finian, and I know you're struggling with technology, but we can still hear you, which is great. But people are reflecting exactly what you're saying here, so they obviously are hearing as well and have their own views on this. So better men's health leads to better women's health. People are strongly agreeing on this. A couple and unsure, but the majority 8 are. And if we could see that slide just before this one, Dermot, which is what are the implications on and the effect of on men's health. So many are saying communication issues, fear, stigmatization, exactly what you're saying, vulnerability, exposed, and stress. So all very difficult, very tough, and this is the effect of people being those stereotypes that need to change. And as you said, Finian, thanks to the likes of conversations like this, thanks to the like of Men's Health Week that the HSE did in the summer in June, things are slowly but surely starting to change.
Yeah, and it's interesting, like some of the other research shows that that men are much more likely to turn to women than to other men when they're looking for support for an emotional or a mental health issue, which is an interesting one as well. There are certain things men like to go to a male doctor for, and they would be like, for example, an STI or problems with the back passage. But when it comes to emotional issues, most men prefer to actually open up to a woman than to another man about those issues. So there's always going to be that interconnection between men's health and women's health like that. And it's interesting as well that 40% of male medical consultations are as the prompting of a female relative or friend. So nearly half of men who aren't the doctors have been cajoled into going. So there's another piece of research. And then men generally have fewer like GP consultations than women.
Yes, I love that point as well that we have on screen. The egalitarian relationships are more sustainable, and that seems to be a theme that's sort of running throughout this evening. And Finian, I have to say, now that you've gone sideways on us, your watch is beautiful. We had a good look at it earlier. I don't know if it's a Christmas present, a tip that you're giving to somebody, but I took a screenshot when no one was looking, and I might be asking for that. Oh, he's gone. I might be asking for that one. But actually, based on those, if we can open it up to the floor, and we're welcoming questions as we look to the clock there. KB, based on what Peter has said and Finian said there, and also I'd love Jackie's view and anything there that's coming across, whether it's with your presidential hat on, Jackie, from the PMI. Anything jump out at you, KB, to start?
I think what's interesting there is that what Finian, the last point that he made was that men don't have an issue speaking to women about emotional or psychological or that side of things, the softer side, because we actually get asked that sometimes on our helpline. Is it only women in there? And we say it's not only women. Well, would you like to speak to a man? No, it's fine. No. And then actually they much rather speak to the female. So it's I suppose it's a little piece of, it's a little nugget for women to be aware that the men are comfortable to speak to more so to a female than man to man, you know what I mean? So, and I appreciate that. It's difficult for anyone to talk about something, you know, difficult in their life, whether it's a medical issue, etc. So, and I think as well, just with, I suppose, the returning to work, the lovely piece mentioned there by Peter, is the joy of connection is really important, and connecting with people. And that 11 o'clock coffee or that meeting at the water cooler is gone. So to make the efforts to try and keep that connection going, because a lot of your work family, you know, are your work friends and colleagues. Some of them are part of your personal life as well, you know what I mean? Some of them have been to your wedding, some of them have been to your christenings, you know what I mean? So sometimes they're in your kitchen having the glass of wine. But still, to, you know, they're really important. That connection, the joy of connection, has gone for some people who are isolated. And if you are if you're in a household that's not a happy household, it can be very lonely. So I think that's a lovely, you know, how are you doing? How are you doing? And to be ready for the answer, which is a lovely piece there from Peter as well.
Yes, there's a lovely message in there from Ronan saying that he agrees the female in the relationship is the one to say, I'd get that looked at. And it's very honest, isn't it? Is that very good, very good, honest piece. Jackie, something that I think, you know, when you're a senior leader in the workplace, and actually also to Peter on this point, on a senior leader in the workplace, and when that culture does start to come in, that culture that we're all talking about that needs to not be there in order to have a healthy workplace, where perhaps the males are being put under pressure to live to a stereotype, the machoism, the alpha male, any of those stereotypes that are causing a toxic situation. What actions have you seen can be taken and have been taken on projects perhaps that you've led or boards that you've worked on?
So from my perspective, I think there's a couple of key takeaways that from a project management perspective. So, you know, in running teams myself in the last 10 years or more, well, lots and lots of years, but particularly in the last 10 years or more, what I've seen is probably a more hands-on role that dads are taking, is what I've seen, and even a more hands-on role in terms of parental care. So I think it's really, really important, no matter whether you're a female or a male leader, when your team needs time off for something, no matter what it be, it's not judgmental. It is time that they need. It's personal time that they need, whether that's to bring their parents, you know, because they have a problem, or it's because their children have something. It shouldn't need to be explained. I mean, the expectation that the females taking time off work to bring the kids somewhere should be really ruled out. It should be anyone in your team, no matter what gender, and that's all genders, equally can take a role in the caring of your family, whether that's your siblings, your parents, whatever. So I've seen that fundamental change over the last, and I suppose even from my own perspective, as the makeup of teams have changed, and, you know, I've got older and people are younger in my teams. I've seen that dynamic of the hands-on dad, thank God, emerging really strongly in the workplace. And I think you have to accommodate your leadership style and project management to accommodate that and be accepting of it, because it's fantastic. Let's be honest, it's fantastic. As a mum myself, it's fantastic to see. I think there were a couple of key other takeaways I've taken away from tonight. I love the recognize, respond, refer. It's like so simple. I just love the strap line. Recognize it, respond, and the recognition, how you're doing, be prepared for the answer that I'm not doing great, and then what's your next answer. So, you know, certainly don't be going, oh, how you doing, I'm expecting you to tell me you're great and I'm just going to move on. That's not empathy in any shape or form, nor engagement. And then I think the second, there's two big things both KB and Finian said. One that KB said, and it just really touched a nerve with me: every conversation counts. So listening to somebody, having that empathy. You don't have to fix anything, you just have to listen. So I think as leaders, that active listening piece that, you know, really good leaders are able to do is what you're bringing to bear here. And then the last piece, I think, in terms from a Finian perspective, is there's more than one way to be a man. And I just love that quote, because there certainly is more than one way to be a man.
Love it. Thank you. Brilliant summary, Jackie, as well. Actually, Peter, while you come in there, I'd love to have another look at and we will send on, as you can see, the further contacts that are there and further information. I'd love to see Peter's quote that he chose from Michelle Obama. Again, there we go. We need to do a better job of putting ourselves higher on our own to-do list. It brings back to one of the key points, Peter, that you made.
Yeah, and I think this is a really important one because, I mean, again, I look at myself and I totally recognize this. So this is actually very personal to me because I'm pretty bad at this. Thank you for your
honesty.
And, you know, I think as well as that, the point that I think that was made by Ronan a second ago about we're very reliant on the women in our lives to, you know, sort of push us into getting things, you know, sorted. And I completely agree with that, totally agree with that. I think the other point that I wanted to bring up, I think, was about male sort of role models in the workplace. And I've seen a big shift in recent years. So we take people like, for example, Satya Nadella, who's the CEO of Microsoft, and he talks very personally, very, very personally about his family experiences. He has a disabled son. He'll tell you about his family life back in India. And he shares that openly with everyone. And he very much embodies those values that we want to see in male leaders. And I think it moves away from the older style of leadership, maybe that was in our parents' generation, where you had to be male, you had to be macho, you had to be tough, all of that. And I think we are seeing a transition in the workplace to having much better male role models. And I think that'll come into more fruition as well over the next few years.
Love hearing that, Peter. That makes the shoulders go down with hope for all of us. Following on from what Jackie said as well. Love that point. Thank you. KB, you have a very special event coming up that you would like to point to anybody who may like more information.
Great. So tomorrow is the official International Men's Day, and we're delighted. Minister for Justice Helen McEntee is going to deliver the open address for our webinar. It's kicking off at 12:30 to 1:30. It's lunch hour tomorrow. And we have a very special guest and presenter. It's Dr. Gareth O'Connor. He is a clinical psychologist for the HSE over in the Midwest area. And he finished his PhD last year in 2020 with the University of Limerick. And it's actually the first PhD for the male victims of domestic violence. And he's going to deliver his PhD for the first time tomorrow. And wow. He has a fantastic backstory. He was born and reared in Ballymun, and he decided in 2014 he wanted to pursue psychology, and he went down to the University of Limerick. And 6 years later, he has his PhD. Sadly, he's lost both his parents, so they won't be there tomorrow to see him actually deliver his PhD. But he has great support. He's a great family behind him. So it's actually quite a significant day for him personally as well, but also for in terms of academic evidence-based research. We have an incredible rich 1 hour of hearing his research from Dr. O'Connor tomorrow. So I'm delighted that Minister for Justice as well is actually going to join us. So it's terrific.
Excellent. Well, KB, CEO of Men's Aid, thank you so much. Personally, I'd love to thank Jackie Glynn, the president of the Ireland chapter of the PMI, and also Peter Glynn, who is the marketing director and also the program director of the Ireland chapter of the PMI, because you promised that you would do an event for International Men's Day. I think it's great support to all the men, the male members, and Finian is back with us as well. So Finian Murray, who is the HSE Men's Health Senior Promotion Officer, you guys together delivered your promise that Jackie made back at International Women's Day to have an event for International Men's Day to show support. You've given some great advice there and support to your members and to anybody else who was here this evening. I think there is a lot of further reading as well that you're going to send on to people. Dermot, you've been working away in the background on this. And Peter, would you like to say anything before we wrap up and before Jackie says goodbye for the evening?
Yeah, I think it's been a fantastic event. I just want to say thank you to everyone for attending, but also it's brought out many, many important issues that we don't necessarily take the time in our busy lives to stop and focus on. So I'd just like to say a big thank you to everyone for a really good event, and we look forward to having this followed up in the not too distant future.
Excellent. Thank you, Peter.
And can I just thank Finian for being so persistent, not giving up for 1 second,
Resilient.
and beating the technical problems into the ground. Well done,
Well
Finian.
said, Dermot.
Absolutely.
Well said, Dermot. Well said.
Now,
thanks a
Jackie.
million.
So finally, Tara, I'd just like to thank Peter very much, because he led out on this panel discussion and formulating it for tonight. So, you know, I certainly put a challenge to the team that definitely have all my support. We'll do whatever we need, but, you know, we need a male member of the board to take the lead on this. And thank you, Peter, for taking that up very well indeed. And really, really proud of what you've done tonight. I'm really proud that we're part of a conversation that really needs to be had. And I think that's the most important thing for us as a community of project managers, that we're participating in that conversation. So for me, I think we achieved that outcome tonight. Having KB here so eloquently talking about the service that she provides, I think if we can promote that on our social media channels and the event tomorrow, we need to do that after the event. And Finian, thank you so much for being resilient and the great tips that you gave in terms of men's health and the honesty about it, the real honesty about it. In relation to women and in terms of the emotional and the physical breakdown. So it's been really an eye-opener for me, and I hope we take some lessons learned and take away and think about one conversation can change everything.
And those 4 words, Peter, how are you doing? Thank you very much, everybody, and hope you also get time to follow up and on that further reading that Dermot will be sending out. And there you go. And then, of course, the little present. We can't forget about the little present, all wrapped up in a little bow. Dermot, would you like to say anything before we let people?
Yeah. So just for PMI members who are certified, there's 1 PDU for tonight. So because our members, that this is open to the public, so it won't self-register the PDU. You need to log on to the CCRS, and that's the code, that's the title. You get 1 PDU, and it's under the strategic topic. So
excellent, and that's it.
Okay.
Good night, everyone. We only kept you a couple of minutes over your time. Thank you for being with us this Thursday evening. And ahead of tomorrow, happy International Men's Day on behalf of
Thanks, Tara.
Bye, guys.
Thanks, everybody. Bye,
guys. Bye, everyone.
Thanks very much.